All right, so some of these terms you're going to remember from sixth grade. Some of them are going to be new to you. Either way, none of it is difficult, so make sure you pay attention. So this section is the beginning of statistics. We're going to start with measures of center. The measures of center are what follows. The first one you should all know for sure is mean. Mean is the same as saying average. So here I explain how you're going to calculate the average or the mean of something. You add each value up and divide by the amount of values you have in total. So here's an example in pink. These are the numbers. You add each one and divide by how many total values you have. Since we have 5 values, you're dividing the total by 5. That gives us a mean of 5 because 25 divided by 5 equals 5. If you have any questions on anything I'm explaining, ask on the spot. Don't let me pass it and then say, Mister, I didn't get it. All right, so now we go to the second measure of center. Mode. Mode is the value that repeats the most in the data set. Now here's an important part here. If there's a tie, which means two numbers repeat the same amount of times, and that is the mode, then there's going to be more than one mode. So if 7 repeats and let's say 2 repeats, 7 and 2 are both the modes. In this case, the example I gave you, only 7 repeats twice, so that will be your mode. Just don't forget, if there's a tie, there's going to be 2 modes, 3 modes, whatever amount is tied at the highest value of repeating. So you should have already copied it. I give you enough time to copy, so let's move on to the next page. It's not a long lesson, so please pay attention. All right, now we have here in green, median. Now, when ordered from least to greatest, that's the most important part because how are you going to know what's in the middle if it's not in order? You have to order from least to greatest. So when finding the mean, you order from least to greatest and you just look for the value right in the middle. Now I have 2 examples here because if you have an odd amount of values, like here, 5 total values, then there's going to be one number in the middle, that's 7. But if it's an even amount of numbers, like this right here, 2, 5, 6, 9, then you have to grab the 2 in the middle, add them, and divide by 2, which gives you 5.5, and that will be your median. So order from least to greatest, the number in the middle is your median. If there's 2 numbers in the middle because it's an even amount, then you just find the average of the 2, add them up, and divide by 2. Next, we move on here to range. For range, range is just calculated for one purpose, to find out how spread your information is. Spread meaning how far to the left does it go, how far to the right does it go, from what number to what number. In order to find that, you just subtract the biggest number minus the smallest number. So maximum minus the minimum. So on this example that I use here in blue, the biggest number is 19, the smallest number is 1. So 19 minus 1 will give you the range, 18. Now here in red, we have outlier. Outlier, the word kind of explains it. Outlier is a value that lies outside of the rest, which means it's very different from the rest. So just find the value that looks very different from the other values, and that will be your outlier. It lies outside the average of the data set. So here, all the numbers here are in the 70s, and then you have a number 1 at the beginning. So in this case, your outlier is 1 because it's very different from the rest. Now over here on the second example below that one, all the numbers are in the 80s, and then you have 200 at the end. 200 is very different than all the other scores, so 200 would be your outlier. Any questions so far? All right. Let's move on to the final page here. So these are the words that you're probably not familiar with. Most of you are not familiar with because you haven't learned this before. So please pay attention. It is not difficult. So the next thing we're going to learn about is quartiles. Now, when ordered from least to greatest, again, to find the quartiles, it's the same as when you find the median. You have to order from least to greatest. So when ordered from least to greatest, the middle of the left side is the lower quartile, and the middle of the right side is the upper quartile. Now, we call the lower quartile Q1, we call the upper quartile Q3. The median is called Q2. Now, this is important here, what I put in parentheses at the end. The middle of the left side is the lower quartile, and the middle of the right side is the upper quartile. But when you calculate those, do not include the actual median. So we'll review that once we do the examples below, but just make sure that you do not include the actual median. Keyword there is actual. All right, now, that was the quartiles here that I explained to you how to solve for. Now it's just the interquartile range. Now that word range deals with how spread the information is. Now in this case, interquartile just means within the quartiles. So that's just Q3 minus Q1, or the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So instead of the biggest number in total minus the smallest number in total, you're just going to look at the values of the quartiles. So the middle of the left side and the middle of the right side, you're going to get both values and subtract them. Whatever value you have, positive, is your answer for range. So here in the bottom, we have the examples. Please pay attention to these examples. So over here, we have 10 total values on the first example. If you have 10 total values, that means that you have an even amount of numbers. So if you have an even amount of numbers, that means there's going to be 2 in the middle. Whenever there's 2 in the middle, you're going to add them up and divide by 2. So 16 plus 18 is 34, divided by 2 is 17. So that tells you that the median, or Q2, is 17. Now, this is where what I put in parentheses comes into play. Do not include the actual median. So, two numbers that were used to calculate the median are 16 and 18. But are either of those numbers 17? They are not. So, because they are not, they are included in the left and right side. So, when I put the box for the left and right side, I included the 16 and I included the 18. Why did I include them? Because those are not the actual median. So they are not the median, they are included in the left and right side. So now on the left side, you have an odd amount of numbers. So the one in the middle, 14, is your lower quartile. And then the one in the middle of the right side here is your upper quartile, Q3. Now look at the second example. In the second example, instead of having an even amount of numbers, we have an odd amount of numbers. That tells you that the median is going to be one value, the one in the middle. But what happens? Now when you go find the quartiles, instead of having one in the middle on the quartiles like you did over here, it's the other way around. You're going to have two numbers in the middle to find the quartile. So do the same thing. Add them up and divide by 2, and you get 8. That would be your lower quartile. Here on the right side, 15 and 16. Add them up and divide by 2, it gives you 15.5. Now let's compare what we did with that middle number, with that median. Over here, 10 is not included on the left side and is not included on the right side. Why? Because that is the actual median. So do not include the actual median when you find your quartiles. Now, what we're going to do on the following page, we're going to copy this information that we just got, and we're going to create something using that information. So, on the next page, I want you to write these things right here. Page after current. One second, let me drink that coffee that's being offered. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. You're the best. Okay, guys. So we're going to copy over this information. We're not going to calculate it again. We already have all this information. So the minimum and maximum is the first thing I'm going to write. Let's use the left example. So 22 and 8 are the biggest and smallest numbers. So minimum and maximum is 8 and 20. Oh, it's 22. 8 and 22. Q1, Q2, and Q3. So Q1 was 14, Q2 was 17, and Q3 was, I believe, 15.5. Let's check. What was the other question? Q3 was 20. All right, so with that information, we're going to create something that's called a box and whisker plot. Sometimes they're just called box plots, but the old school name is box and whisker plots, and it's actually easier to understand if you use the word whiskers. Now let's add one more word here, range. So the minimum is 22, the maximum is 22, the minimum is 8. If you subtract them, you get 14. Now I'm going to explain to you where all these things come into play when you create a box and whisker plot. So first thing you do is create a number line. So down here, you have a number line. Now, how many lines or ticks go in that number line depends on the range. So if your range is 14, that means you only need 14 sticks because the smallest stick is going to belong to 8 and the biggest stick is going to belong to 22, your minimum and maximum. So we know we're only going to need 14 of these. I'm going to do 15 just to be safe. So here we have a number line. So this is what we're going to do. The first line we make, right? This is what it's going to look like at the end. Something like this. This is a box and whisker plot. The first line we're going to make is this middle line, which is Q2. So Q2 is 17. That means the line in the middle must be 17. So we put a number 17 on there and put our first line. Now, just to be safe, let's number the rest of the graph. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Let's go this way. 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, and 8. So this is for sure going to include all of our data because it's within our biggest and smallest number. So the first line we make is in the median. It's 17. We're already done with that line. Now the next two lines are going to be with our lower quartile and upper quartile, which is 14 and 20. So on 14, put a line. On 20, you put a line. Once you have the three lines, that makes up your box in the middle. So on a box and whisker plot, you'd be done with the box at this point. All you're missing is the two whiskers. What do you think the two whiskers are? Your minimum is your left whisker, and your maximum is your right whisker. So you put a line on 8, connect it to your box. You put a line on 22 and connect it to your box. And that's it. We just created a box and whisker plot using that information. Any questions so far? All right, so on the next page, you're going to try this all out together. You're going to find all of these things that we went through. You're going to find the mean, you're going to find the mode, you're going to find the median, the range, outlier, if there is one, the quartiles, and the interquartile range. You're going to find all of those things. Now, today I won't make you create a box and whisker plot during your classwork, but this is the information needed to create a box and whisker plot. So when we do it tomorrow, you already know how to calculate everything. Only thing missing would be just to draw the box and whisker plot like we just did here. All right, so on the next page, go ahead and try it. I'll give you a full 10 minutes. So at 9:23, I will review it. And you're just going to find A through H. Find me the mean, the mode, the median, outlier. Let's scratch off outlier because there is no outlier on this example because all the numbers are pretty close together. So just find me the mean, mode, median, range, and then lower, upper quartiles, and the interquartile range. All of that you have the explanation for in the previous pages on your notes. So go ahead and get it started. 9:23 we review. Give you guys a little extra time to handle it. Let's solve all of these. Remember, without a calculator, you're going to struggle on this section. You need to add up a bunch of numbers. So here, first of all, A, find the mean. How do you find the mean? You add up all these values and divide by how many values you have in total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I know whatever the top total is, I'm going to divide it by 9. Now I just have to add up all these numbers. 22 plus 20 plus 18 plus 18 plus 16 plus 16. Add them all up and it gives you 145. Divided by 9, 16.1. Now, mode is the number that repeats the most. So we have 16 twice, and we have 18 twice. Since that is the highest amount of repetition for a number, and there's two numbers with the same amount, there's two modes, 16 and 18. Next, the median. To find the median, it has to be ordered from least to greatest. So in this case, it's already ordered from least to greatest. You know you have 9 total numbers, so that's an odd amount. There's going to be 1 in the center. So we count 4 from each side. This 16 is our median. Now, range is the biggest number minus the smallest number. So 22 minus 8 give you 14. Now here on F, we're trying to find the lower quartile and the upper quartile, and then the IQR. So all that has to do with is the center of the left side and the center of the right side. So here, since this 16 is our median, we can't use this as part of our left and right side. So now when we look at the left side, there's two numbers in the middle. Add them up and divide by 2, you get 13.5. That would be the lower quartile. Now we do the same thing with the right side of the data set. You have 18, 18, 20, 22. The two in the center are 18 and 20. Add them up and divide by 2, you get 19. 19 is your upper quartile. Now all you do is subtract your upper quartile minus your smaller quartile. So 19 minus 13.5 would give you 5.5. And that's all.